Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
It was crass, it was crude, but it's what blokes do when they've had a drink or they get together. The comments made by Donald Trump all those years ago. Nigel Farage, his friend, possibly even associate, challenged yesterday on that ITV debate. Peter in Coventry. Do you agree, Peter? Good morning.
Well, hello, Nick. How are you? And I'm going to be predictable. Great show, by the way.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. Thank you very much, Governor.
Everybody says that.
Well,
Well, I
Boris
just
Johnson,
explained your researcher.
Oh, yes.
And I was thinking to myself, well, hang on a minute. Jo Swinton, isn't she a man-hating feminist? Because it seems to me like every time a man makes a comment or does something just slightly wrong, what you've got now is you've got the people like Jo Swinton,
Swinson.
and the rest of them. Oh, yeah, Swinton. Sorry.
That's all right. No, that's my job. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but you've got these people in power that are depressing men. Now, take this example, Nick. For example,
Go ahead.
I'm a builder.
Right.
I'm a builder. Right.
Yep.
10 years ago, if I saw a pretty girl, I'd wolf whistle her and go, "Hello, darling."
Right.
Right? Because that's what I am. I'm a man.
Yes.
I'm a man, yeah.
Doesn't mean you have
That's
to do that, of course.
So, sorry, yeah, but the point I'm trying to put across is...
When did you stop saying hello, darling, and wolf whistling at attractive women?
When I realised it was becoming illegal. You know,
Right.
because that's what it is now. You're not allowed to even look at a girl.
Right.
I daren't even look at a girl now when I'm driving down the road. I'm a man. I'm a man's man. I always have been.
Right.
But now I'm scared to death in case I look at a girl the wrong way.
Right.
And she might report me for,
Well, I think you're allowed to... Peter, do you think you're stretching it a little bit? Because you're allowed to look at women as you're driving along. Well, providing your eyes are on the road as well.
How long for? How long are we allowed to even look at women? Because we've got these feminists that have got into the schools, and they're also turning our young people, young boys, into women with all this...
Let's come at this a different way. Given that it was 2005, and given that the American people seem to have forgiven him for it, but a US president using language like that, albeit 14 years ago, how acceptable or unacceptable was that?
Well, if it was in private, and somebody obviously snitched on him and recorded it, knowing full well that he could become president, then, the person who's in the wrong is the person who recorded it, not Mr. Trump. Because if I'm in a pub... Right. Okay, I'm not as crude as that. But if I'm in a pub and I see a pretty girl and I'm with my mates...
Right, yeah. You're going to say what a jolly pretty girl she is with a lovely shape.
Well...
Rather more crudely than that. Right.
Yes, but, this is what I'm getting at. Today's man now feels suppressed. This is what I'm saying. Because we cannot even wink at a girl or smile at them. You feel intimidated.
Right.
Because...
Do you really feel suppressed, do you? Genuinely feel suppressed?
Well, I'm a happily married man now, of course.
Right.
But, so I don't, and this is honest to God, so I look at a pretty girl, yeah, I'll look at a pretty girl, but I won't.
Right. There you go, you won't do that.
I won't approach a girl.
No, God, no.
I won't approach a girl because of that reason, because I'm happily married.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it.
Philip in Wantage, hello there.
Hello.
What should happen to jihadis who leave Britain or anywhere else and go to the Middle East to fight for organisations like Islamic State?
Yes, if you go off to fight for an organisation like the Islamic State, which is perpetually committing war crimes and other barbarisms, you should be stripped of both your civil rights and human rights. It's like declaring a person an outlaw in the past, so you should no longer have the protection that's given to people who offer normal human traits. So
well, what should that... But what does that amount to if they come back? You'd have them back here, would you?
I would not seek to get them back, but if they made their way back, as soon as they arrived, I would arrest them instantly. It would be summary justice, if we could prove simply that they had gone overseas to be a jihadi, they would then be sentenced to life imprisonment. We would have a special prison where they were segregated from other prisoners so that no one in there was not a jihadi. So if they wanted to radicalise each other, they could. We could even run a zero-carbon experiment in the prison so they didn't have access to any hydrocarbon products.
Oh, Philip. It was going so well until it wasn't. Thank you. I mean, to a degree, I agree with your hardline approach, but I think we got lost. We got lost in translation towards the end there, didn't we? Philip in Wantage, thank you.
Jerry next in Chelsea. Jerry, what's cutting through to you? Hello.
Hi, Eddie. Can I just say quickly that socially I would normally be Labour, and I've never voted Tory, but I really believe in Brexit, so I've been torn about what I should do. And I've watched the debates, I listen to your radio all the time, and social media is getting my attention lately, especially today. I saw a post which wasn't telling you which party to vote for, but it was a post on a Brexit Votes Matter page on Facebook, and it just resonated with me. It brought a tear to my eye, and it was just saying, it was like, people like me, I believe in Brexit, but I'm normally Labour, but Labour won't deliver Brexit, so I'm having to go against my own beliefs, if you like.
And who did the ad?
There was a page this morning. It wasn't telling you who to vote for. It was just a short statement on a Facebook page called Brexit Votes Matter.
Well, I'm just curious, as somebody must have done it, somebody trying to influence you, and heaven knows, Jerry, they brought a tear to your eye, so something worked.
They did.
But you don't know really who put it up there and who it's from.
Well, it's pro-Brexit, but it doesn't support any political party, so it might be someone like Leave EU behind it or something, but it never says, it just says vote for your pro-Brexit candidate, whether they're Labour, Tory or BP, a Brexit party. They don't tell you which party to vote for, but it was about democracy. It was just saying, look, if you believe in democracy and the values of democracy, you've got to uphold the democratic decision. So I'm going with my heart says go with Brexit, which means voting for Boris, voting for Tory, and I've never done that.
And you've sort of astonished yourself.
I have, because I'm thinking, no, really, I've been beating myself up every day, and I'm thinking, Boris could be a liar, he could let us down, he could not deliver Brexit, I don't know. But if I want Brexit, I've got to vote Tory, even though it's against my normal values. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and this goes to what Sam Jeffers from Who Targets Me was telling me just a little bit earlier. I don't know if you heard him. He was saying that, particularly in the closing days of this campaign, on social media, you are going to be, not just you, but we're all going to be bombarded with stuff that reinforces how we already think. And it sounds like somebody's very cleverly thought, oh, Jerry, we know Jerry.
Yeah.
He's not sure how... He's definitely for Brexit, but he's not sure how to vote.
Yeah.
We need to keep him on side.
Exactly. And their message seems to be vote for the pro-Brexit candidate in your constituency. It never tells you what party.
But are you curious as to exactly who put it up there?
Well, it's one of these Facebook groups. So they don't seem to spend a lot of money, because you can see how much money they spend. It's not a big money group.
Yeah, but Jerry, it brought a tear to your eye. It brought a tear to your eye.
Yeah, it did.
Did the John Lewis commercial this year, did the John Lewis ad bring a tear to your eye? Did it? No. And look at the millions they spent on that.
Do you want me to read you the statement? It's very short. I'll read it you, see if it brings a tear to your eye.
Okay, I'm already welling up, Jerry, but go on.
All right. It doesn't mention any party, so
Okay.
I'll just read it as it is. It says, here we go.
Yeah.
It says, dear Remainers, you simply don't care or understand that the most important things in life are not financial or tangible. Freedom, democracy, free speech, pride in your nation and your culture are our so-called values, values which many of us hold dear. I will tell you that we took oaths, and many of us put our lives on the line to protect these values. It means more than you will ever know. That's what it says.
Oh, Jerry, I'm going to have to play some music. Sorry, Jerry, I just got a bit emotional there.
So we know the problem is there. I think you'd have to be in a vanishingly small minority to say that there is no problem. There clearly is a problem, and you can point to all sorts of evidence. The level of awareness, I think George and I wouldn't agree with that. But is it okay to cause children sleepless nights? Christopher in Tolworth. Christopher, you're on the radio. What do you say? Good morning.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Grand, thank you. But what about you and your view on this?
My view has always been the same ever since she's basically, become into the public domain, so to speak, that I'm absolutely 100% with Jeremy Clarkson. I mean, I know that he's got a bit of a bad rap at times, and he says, he speaks from the heart. There's no doubt about that, and I agree with him. I think, this girl, I mean, okay, we all want to be... We want to be aware of what's going on, but in my view, the world's not going to blow up in the next 100 years, or 1,000 years.
Wow.
If this, the whole changing of the weather situation, is to blame with what we're doing now, then I'm amazed. But this girl, I mean, I can't believe she's not normal. Do you know what I mean?
Well, hang on. What in that she's so committed?
Well, I think that there's, it's absolutely over the top, everything she says. I mean, she's 16 years old. She hasn't done anything with her life yet. Mm-hmm. And, if she was sort of like 30 years old, 40 years old, something like that, she's lived a life, then I might sort of like listen a little bit more. We're all aware of the situation. Okay. We do... I mean, in this country, I think we actually do reasonably well with, trying to save the planet, so to speak. She wants to be, sitting herself in China or something like that, and, trying to talk them into changing the world.
I mean, do you not? And apparently the young woman has Asperger's, which might inform some of the way because she's so totally committed. Do you not admire her level of commitment, though? Not necessarily.
I mean, I admire that she's focused on something, but I just don't think that we need it.
Grateful for the starting point. Christopher, thank you. James in Barnet. James, your reaction to this war of words now. Good morning.
Morning, Nick.
Hello.
I have to say this really winds me up, and not because it's against climate change. I have to say I'm a massive eco-warrior when it comes to that. But with things that she says, like pointing fingers at the older generations, my dad was 77 when he passed away, and he had a wind-up radio. So how much pollution was he causing when he was a kid? So I think, look, it's all well and good trying to make a difference. I definitely think that's something that should be done. But trying to add the UK's output of pollution to their output every year.
Yeah.
So I think until that's being resolved, pointing fingers at your generation and older generations is pretty pointless, to be honest. It's her generation that have used the most power and fossil fuels and will continue to.
Well, they won't have used as much as me, will they? Because I've owned a car for about 40 years. I mean, isn't that right? No?
Well, you have, but look how many electronic devices she's used throughout her life compared to what you would have done for the first 40 years of yours.
When they weren't even... I see what you're saying. James, got it. Thank you for that. We'll move away from there. We come back to the story with which we started this hour, which is Jeremy Clarkson on a promotional tour in Australia, making disobliging comments about Greta Thunberg, saying that she's dangerous and that she's mad and she's a Swede with a temper and that she should go back and study. She should go back to school and study science to help find solutions. Not sure with it, but this bit, she is unnecessarily frightening children, and that's what interests me. Molly in Chelmsford, what's your view on that? Molly, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Morning, Nick.
Yes.
Actually, I thought the girl was being used, actually, by the fanatic adults.
Right.
She's very outspoken.
You don't think she's committed herself? She looks jolly... When I've seen her, I've never met the young woman, but when I've seen her, she looks jolly committed to me. You don't think that's for real?
Yeah, she sounds like she's coming across very well. She puts the project across very well. But I still think she's being used. She's getting across to the younger people.
Yeah.
Not so long ago, I saw a video where she was at a press conference with a few others and adults.
Yes.
Putting the questions to her. She couldn't answer them. She was passing the questions on to the other people on the panel.
In fairness, she's only 16. No?
Sorry?
I say she's only 16. She doesn't necessarily... I don't know that we all had the answers to everything at 16, did we?
This is it. She's only 16. She should be at school. She should be learning a bit more.
All right.
It's so...
All right. So, some people will say, of course, the way she's got her message through is absolutely unparalleled. Molly, thank you. Michael in Christchurch. Michael, your reaction to Greta Thunberg? Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning to you.
Hello,
I think she's been exploited by the media for their own ends. One thing I want to ask the question, if I may,
Go on.
and I haven't got the answer to this, is that when the Romans were in Britain, they grew grapes in Newcastle, and it was hot then, and then it took, and that was in the word zero, and then 1500 the Thames froze. So the time, so another 1,000 years will get hot again, and it's getting hot. So what was the sea levels when the Romans were here?
Oh, well, you see, now, Steve Allen would know what the sea levels were when the Romans were here, but because he was on broadcasting even then, but I'm afraid I don't. But I get the point you're driving at, which is that there used to be the theory that much of this is cyclical. I think, in all honesty, science has probably moved on from then, and without doubt there is an issue. Michael, thank you.
Let's talk about some of the other pledges, just briefly, before we let you go. You say that within 100 days of being elected, you'll legislate to enshrine your funding plans for the NHS and schools in law. Why do you need to legislate to do that? If you're in government, do you not trust yourself to carry out those plans?
Well, I think what we want to do is to reassure people that we are really serious about this, that we put the money into the schools and hospitals in much the same way, if you remember, during the Parliament before last, we legislated on the aid budget to give people reassurance of our commitment to this. This is about saying to the British people, look, at this election, there's a clear choice. If we get a Conservative majority, we will be able to get Brexit done, then deliver the money for the schools and the hospitals.
All right,
or alternatively, we will be spending 2020 negotiating a relationship.
We're going to talk to Labour later. Oliver Dowden, you've mentioned the figures. Now, the figures the Prime Minister uses are £34 billion for the NHS and £14 billion for schools. But those numbers are neither accurate nor honest, are they?
They're exact. In fact, to be precise, I suppose it's £33.9 billion.
No, well,
for the NHS.
We've asked the Institute for Fiscal Studies about both those numbers. They've told us for the NHS number, you've ignored inflation, and for the schools number, you've ignored inflation and double counted each year. The actual numbers, taking inflation into account, are £20.5 billion for the NHS, not £34 billion, and £4.3 billion for schools. Not £14 billion. I mean, it's all very well writing your plans into law, but if you're using inaccurate numbers, is that law going to be worth the paper it's written on?
No, I heard that the Brexit Party wasn't going to be represented around my area, so I haven't got anyone to vote for.
Oh, so you're not... Sorry, I've misunderstood. You're not voting at all now?
No, I'm not voting at all. No, I don't think... Well, Labour doesn't agree with Brexit, and I don't think Boris will do the Brexit that I want. I don't know. Yeah, so the only one I was going to vote for was Brexit, and now I can't vote. I can't.
You've got nobody standing in your constituency for the Brexit Party. What about I suppose, arguably, the next best thing?
I'm not doing any of them. No, there's no next best thing.
And what is it about Boris Johnson's Brexit deal that you can't get behind?
I don't trust him, to be honest. I don't think he... I mean, he was standing there last night with Macron and the others, and... Yeah, I don't think he's going to do Brexit. He's in with all the top people, isn't he? So he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it properly. He's in with all this.
You mean because of who he was talking to at that event at the Palace the other night?
Yeah, they're all in together.
Well, he's the Prime Minister. He's the Prime Minister. He was at a summit. He's bound to speak to them. He's got to speak to them. It's his job.
No, it's job. They were standing together, weren't they? All like pally and...
Well, what do you want him to do? Swan around punching people at the Palace because he's going to deliver Brexit? Come on, he's got to talk to people.
Yeah, I know, but that was like, you could just tell from you can just tell from the body language. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what goes on, but...
And what is it about Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party that makes you think? Well, because the truth is they're not. But the truth is, Karen, they're not going to get into power. You know that, don't you? Even if they were standing in your constituency, they're not going to get into power. So you were hoping for an MP, were you?
They would have had a say. They might have got in with
a few MPs
and had a say and pushed for the Brexit that the everyday people want, not Boris's Brexit is going to be a wishy-washy Brexit. We all know it, you know. It's going to be wishy-washy.
Why is it going to be wishy-washy? You just want to walk away and abandon everything? No arrangements, no trade deal? Is that what you want? Do you know what you want from Brexit?
Brexit is just getting out of the political thing and the whole, you know, why are we governed by these people?
We're not governed by them. If they were, we wouldn't all be voting next Thursday, would we, Karen?
We give all their money to them. Where
Karen,
we don't know where that money goes.
Let me ask you though, Karen, I'm just going to try and talk you down off this ledge because I think people should use their vote. How can you, on the one hand, complain that we are governed by these people, whoever these people are, and be given a vote? Hang on, let me finish. You've been given a vote. You've been given an opportunity to vote in your own nation, in your own parliament, and you're rejecting it. You're rejecting it. You're turning yourself into somebody without a vote. Nobody else is doing that to you. You are doing that to you.
My vote gone. He's disappeared into thin air.
It hasn't.
I gave my vote. Now I can't vote again in this silly general election because there's no one to vote for. I'm not voting again. It's annoying. You know, I don't...
Well, I think you're being silly, Karen.
I've got nobody to vote for. I voted Brexit. Where's Brexit gone? It's gone into thin air. They think
it hasn't. Boris Johnson is delivering Brexit.
He's not delivering it. He won't deliver that.
He said, well, he's got a deal with the European Union that takes us out of the European Union, so that's Brexit. Isn't it? Well, it is. I guarantee you, if he gets a majority, we'll be out of the European Union by early winter next year.
Yeah, right.
Well, we will.
I don't believe any of it. Oh, Tony Blair done it for me with politics and his Iraq war and his weapons of mass destruction. That's it. I've stopped believing politicians since then. And since then, it's all been downhill.
Oh, they're terrible. I mean, God, a lot of them are terrible liars. You've got no argument from me for that.
People went out and voted for Brexit 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And we haven't got it. What is the rest of the world thinking?
But Karen, the current Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party says every single day on Twitter and out of his actual mouth, attached to his actual head, let's get Brexit done, vote for Conservatives, give me a majority, we will be out by the end of January. What about that, don't you believe?
A million times. He can say that a million times. I don't believe him. You can say things out of your mouth. I don't believe him.
Oh, God. What will it take for you to believe? What will it take for you to believe?
Did you believe that? No.
Pardon?
I didn't believe it.
Believe what?
Weapons of mass destruction. What a load of rubbish that was.
Well, should we stick to Brexit? Should we stick to Brexit just for and this election?
Brexit. Yeah, let's stick to Brexit.
Well, you know, you could look at Nigel Farage and say that he hasn't stuck to his word all the time as well. So why do you still keep faith with him?
I'm not keeping faith with him. I'm keeping faith with what it is, the Brexit. Get out of...
But he has said, I believe Boris Johnson. The leader of the Brexit Party has said...
I didn't the other week. He said, I'm a bit worried about now what Boris is saying. Oh, my word, you know.
So you've lost faith in them all. But if a Brexit Party candidate was in your constituency, you'd vote for them?
Yes, I would, yes.
Okay. Well, it's been interesting to talk to you, Karen. I think you do a bit of sort of political self-harm against yourself, albeit, but it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
You know, here is the Treasury directly contradicting the Prime Minister on the Brexit that he is building his entire election campaign on. So the entire election campaign is built upon a lie. How do I know? The Treasury just told me. And now you're listening to me saying, no, it isn't. Shut up, James. No, it isn't. Actually, I don't know why I did a costive accent there. You could be very, very posh. No, it isn't. Talk me through how you end up there or how you can stay there. Here's the why would the Treasury secretly publish something? I don't know. Darren is in Woking. Darren, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I was looking at how we got into the rabbit hole because somehow that's slightly easier than how we get out of it, and they're both pretty difficult. But
yes.
I actually wonder, and I don't know if this is my age, so I'm 36, so I don't know if this is because I grew up majority under a sort of New Labour government, but I wonder if this is the coming of age of the spin doctor, and I obviously refer to Alistair Campbell. Now,
as in the ball he set rolling has delivered what we now see.
Yes, because what I think spin is about is testing boundaries of exaggeration.
Yes.
And as you test those boundaries and get away with more and more, you can exaggerate more and more. And one could argue that you end up in a place where you can just carry out barefaced lies. And
now, Alistair Campbell would furiously reject this, at which point you would say weapons of mass destruction, and he...
No, I would...
Oh, OK.
Sorry, I was a big New Labour supporter, and weapons of mass destruction, obviously, is the dodgy dossier and everything is what it is. But I was a big New Labour supporter, and generally to the left, but I'm also a Brexiter as well, as we've spoken before. So I wouldn't necessarily go back on the cliches of weapons of mass destruction and all of that, but I think it's not about, I'm not attacking him as an individual, it's a process that there hasn't ever been boundaries set to. So if you let your kid get away with more and more every day, you go from a place where things are a bit naughty to all of a sudden your house is being turned upside down and parents are getting hit by their 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, like I know this is going to be dodgy saying this to you, you might rip me apart, but when you look at the 350 million on the side of the bus, there was one word, in my opinion, that was wrong with that, and it was the word send.
Right.
We send 350 million to the EU. We don't. We send 150, 160. But, we could go over old ground and debate that as well. But
that's not.
Yeah, and that is the spin. Now,
well, no, hang on. You can't be. The problem can't be with the word "send" if the numbers are wrong, mate.
Well, because I think it was designed from what I've read, Tim Shipman's book, but the Uncivil War, was it Brexit, the Uncivil War, whatever it was. Oh no, sorry, I'm confusing the two.
Don't worry, but I'm not splitting hairs. I'm just pointing out that the number wasn't true. So the problem with the bus was not the word "send."
No, if it said you are right. And then the
other bit of it. No, hang on, because this is quite dangerous what you've just said. Because the other bit of it that was missing was the implied suggestion that we would somehow be better off, gross, as a result of not paying our membership fees to the European Union, where the government's own economic analyses, this government, the one led by Boris Johnson, the man that ran Vote Leave, every single scenario sees economic damage. The only argument is about how much. So we are going to be worse off. And that bus not only got the number wrong, and under your analysis the word "send" wrong, but the implied suggestion that we would have money to spare as a result of leaving the European Union was a massive lie. So, anyway, back to the bus.
They get away with it.
Well, you fell for it.
The implied suggestion...
You fell for it.
No. I don't know. I mean, you speak to hundreds and hundreds of people. I genuinely, to this day, would say I didn't fall for 80% of it, and my reasons for voting Leave were very narrow. And I don't believe that we need straight. We're never, we're going to have straight bananas instead of bendy bananas. I don't necessarily believe freedom of movement is terrible for our country, and immigration is what's caused the problem.
But you gave your vote to the people that told all those lies.
I gave my vote to the cause of Leave.
No, you gave your vote to the people who told those lies. You gave your vote to the people that painted that bus. You gave your vote to the people who claimed we could have our cake and eat it. Whether you like it or not, Darren, you did.
I understand why you're saying that, but
no. You did. Did you give your vote to the people who told the lies, or did you give your vote to the people who were on the other side?
Well, there were lies on both sides.
No, there weren't.
There were.
No, there weren't. There were forecasts and analyses that have not been borne out by events. Mark Carney has done more to undermine his own economic forecasts than any Bank of England governor in history.
Let me make this point, James.
Well,
I agree
briefly.
with you.
Yeah, but you're still in denial, mate. You gave your vote to the liars.
You always say about Mark Carney on the morning of the referendum done everything he possibly could to break his own forecast. Yeah?
Yes.
Now that is true, but what he should have done to substantiate.
So he wasn't a liar, was he?
Vote, what he should have done, he spun it. He should have said before the vote, unless I do this on the morning of the referendum result, this is what it will lead to, and that is missed on both sides. And
Right, yeah, but no, the whole point about a warning is that it's designed to stop people doing the stupid thing. You don't add on the end of the warning, by the way, if you do the stupid thing, don't worry, I'll look after you.
You don't add the truth, is what you're saying, John.
No, you don't add the possibility that people are going to ignore the warning. You ignored the warning, Darren. Don't get cross with him. At some point between now and Judgment Day, you're going to have to start getting cross with yourself. It's 11:13, and there, in a nutshell, is the problem. That's the choice. Darren's a decent fella, bright, not racist, didn't vote for Bendy Bananas, but he still, somewhere, clings to the notion that what he did in June of 2016 wasn't really stupid. And he's picking on the people that warned him that it was for not having told him more about what they would do to unpick the damage he's inflicted on his own country. Talking about a bus, saying that the problem with it was the word send. The number was false. The idea that we'd be better off, which the bus was designed to inflate, was false. And don't take my word for it. Take the word of the government currently led by the man that led Vote Leave. The man who said that trading between Northern Ireland and Great Britain would be unfettered. The man whose Treasury has just concluded, well, no, it won't, pal. Paul's in Camden. Paul, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. You said your rabbit in the hat.
Hole.
It's a fallacy. And
Hole.
the reason it's
rabbit in a hole, rabbit hole.
Because people don't vote on just one thing.
No.
The election is not done on just one lie. It's done on a whole raft of things. So, if I vote for Boris, I'm probably going to do, I do it and I know he's a liar. Vote for Corbyn and I know, guaranteed, my mortgage rates will go up. So you ask me what I'm going to choose. Practical. You're not going to choose mortgage rates going up. That's it. And I'd like to leave you with this.
But you're trusting the liar.
I'd like to leave you with this.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that, Paul. If you're not prepared to indulge in a conversation, then you've called the wrong show. You're going to trust a liar, and you've somehow rationalised that to yourself because you think Jeremy Corbyn will cost you money.
Absolutely, and he's a liar.
No, that's fine. That's 23 after 11. What's the biggest lie Jeremy Corbyn's told, do you think? About, let's just say this week.
Can I just say one thing?
No, just answer my question. What's the biggest lie he's told this week?
Haven't a clue.
And there you are, tugging your forelock. John's in Ballymena. John, what would you like to say?
Hello, yeah. I just wanted to sort of generally speak more about the divide and how I see it. And I've kind of watched this now. You can say from Trump and Brexit, the divide and the narrative and the pushing and the biasness as well has been so overwhelming across the board that most people are just sick of that. Not so much sick of the politics; they're sick of all the biasness. And you know,
what do you mean by bias? I don't understand.
Well, to be fair, you've done a fine job of proving it this morning the way you speak.
Yes, go on. So what do you mean?
Truth, and your truth is only the truth, and that's it. And anyone else is a lie, and you're an idiot if you don't believe your truth.
So where are you getting your Treasury forecasts from? Because mine's from the Treasury.
No, you can get specific on one point.
Well, that's all we're talking about today.
How about speaking about the bigger truth?
No. How about you tell me where you're getting your predictions on what's going to happen to trade in Northern Ireland from? Because I'm getting mine from the Treasury.
How about this?
No, John, just tell me where you're getting your information from, because I've told you where I get mine from.
Would you let me then? Would you let me?
Yeah, absolutely. Fill your boots.
Right, okay. I think the actual source of information has become so widespread now. Now, again...
That doesn't mean anything.
Sorry?
The source of information has become so widespread now. What does that mean?
Yeah. Via the internet and via the way people communicate globally
so where are you getting yours from? I'm getting my views on Northern Ireland Protocol, unfettered access to the UK internal market from the Treasury, John. So where are you getting yours from?
Let's take it broader. If you want
No,
to
let's
talk
not.
about
Just tell me where you're getting your information from.
No, because you can't do this. You're being overbearing.
I'm doing it now.
If you want to be more truthful,
where are you getting your information from?
If we look at the actual state of Europe, the financial state of Europe.
Yes, but where are you getting your information from on this?
To look at.
Are you going to tell me, John?
About Brexit and Trump and he said, she said.
Here's the Treasury. Where are you getting yours from?
You push divide. You push a so-called educated and working class divide, and because.
David's in Enfield. David, what's going on?
And the first thing we're going to show him is this image. It was referred to by John McDonnell. It's in the Yorkshire Evening Post.
And the front page of the Mirror.
And the front page of the Mirror. You're quite right. Thank you for coming in on me there. And this is a 4-year-old with suspected pneumonia forced to sleep on the floor of Leeds General Infirmary due to lack of beds. What's your response, Paul?
Yeah, it's terrible. No one should have to, obviously, undergo that level of service, as it were, in a hospital. But I'm glad to see that actually there is an investment that's going in already to expand the children's unit there and to build a new hospital in Leeds as well.
Right, but who's been in charge of the NHS? Who's been in charge of the NHS since 2010?
Well, nonetheless, as I say, this is why we need to make sure that there's enough money going in now to avoid that from happening.
Well, what was wrong with putting in more money earlier?
No, what I'm saying, well, you've actually just been talking about the fact that we've been picking up the pieces from the structural deficit that we inherited.
No, we haven't been talking about that, actually.
Well, in terms
we've been
of the
talking
fact
about
that
Labour. We've been talking about Labour's economic programme. Let's just focus on what we are talking about and what we've shown our viewers here. And that is a 4-year-old sleeping on the floor of a big hospital. The hospital's apologised. This happened a few days ago. You've been in charge of the NHS for 10 years. Is that acceptable?
No, I say that's not acceptable. I started off by saying that's acceptable.
All right, so you said it's not acceptable,
there's two things.
Why haven't you put more money in? Why are you only putting it in now?
There's two things. No, there's two things here. First of all, yes, we need to put more money in, and we are. That's why we're pledging £34 billion over the next few years.
Now, hang on. I'm going to have to interrupt you there. You've got to stop using that figure, because that is a cash figure. The real figure is £20.5 billion.
Based on assumptions of inflation, but there's £34 billion of actual money.
Right, but that is how we measure the amount of money going in. So shall we just call it? Let's just be consistent. Let's just call it £20.5 billion in real terms by 2023-24.
Let's be consistent. There's more money than ever before going into the NHS as a result of this. But that's not sorting out this problem. What I was going to say is the second issue of this is how that money is spent. And it's really important. We've just been talking about nationalisation and other forms of spending that the Labour Party are proposing. And a lot of that is dogmatic. It's actually to fill in the political theory. What actually, a lot of the money that we're going to be investing in the NHS and are investing in the NHS
but you're not. But this is not a record. This is not a record increase. Let's just be clear. It's lower, actually.
No, what I'm saying.
It's lower than the average increase in the post-war period. And that's according to the IFS.
No, you're talking about increases. Well, I'm just talking about the fact that it's more money than ever gone before in the NHS that will be going... That's what I'm saying.
But that is the cash figure, and that's why we need to talk about a real terms figure. Now, I'm not going to spend the whole of this interview debating a figure with you when I am very clear, as are the IFS and as our government figures, this is £20.5 billion. And actually, the increase is lower than the historic average into the NHS.
Joe,
now, I'm happy then to discuss further than that, but those are the figures.
But Joe, you asked about this poor boy that's
no, I've been talking about the figures.
But that's how you started off the interview, talking about this poor boy.
But are you going to stick to the figures that I'm using?
What I want to know, what I want to be able to make sure is that this is not happening again. And it's partly due to money, but what I was saying, it's also how that money is spent. What we can't have is dogmatic spending, as we've just heard from John McDonnell. We've got to make sure that everything has a way of getting to the front line. Right. There are ways that the hospitals that are being built, for example, I know from my own...
How many hospitals are being built, by the way?
There are 6 immediately, there's 20 coming up, and then there's...
Again, you haven't been clear on that, but we are challenging...
No, we have. I can happily go through that if you wanted me to.
But we are challenging your claims about record levels of investment in the NHS. They are not record levels. We are not talking about cash terms, we're talking about real terms. And then we can have a sensible conversation.
Well, no, because we've shifted on already from the first question you asked about this poor boy in Leeds.
Yes, because you then immediately went to the figures that you're putting into the NHS
Joe, what I'm saying is not just about cash. We organise that money, spend that money in the best way so it's seen at the front line of services rather than dogmatic spending.
Why haven't you put more funding in earlier?
Well, we have. We increased...
No, earlier, as in over the last 9 years.
We increased our NHS funding last year. People, were talking about... We put in £390 million a week more under Theresa May. You'll have the real terms figure adjusted for inflation.
All right, let's move on.
As long as it's more money going in and people seeing...
No, it's not good enough just to say that as long as it's more money going. You have to be accurate about what you're talking about.
Right now, in a number of states, the laws allow a baby to be born from his or her mother's womb in the 9th month. It is wrong. It has to change.
Have you seen the photo, Prime Minister? Have you seen the photo?
I've just been told about it by the BBC. We need to be making investments.
This is the photo.
We need to be making investments now. And that's why we're putting £34 billion
This is a 4-year-old boy, Prime Minister, suspected of pneumonia, forced to lie on the floor on a pile of coats.
I understand. And obviously we have every possible sympathy for everybody who has a bad experience in the NHS. 40 new hospitals.
I'm talking about this boy, Prime Minister. How do you feel looking at that photo?
Of course. And let me tell you that I haven't had a chance to look.
Why don't you look at it now, Prime Minister?
I'll study it
Look at it now. This is Jack Willerman.
If you don't mind, I'll give you an interview now. What we are doing is we are talking with...
You refuse to look at the photo. You've taken my phone, put it in your pocket, Prime Minister. His mother says the NHS is in crisis. What's your response to that?
I'm sorry, look. It's a terrible, terrible photo, and I apologise, obviously, to the families and all those who have terrible experiences in the NHS. But what we are doing, the Sturgeon in coalition. And I'm sorry to have taken your phone. There you go. Sorry.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
James has called. Hello, James.
Hello there.
Your Brexit party, your voting Brexit party.
Yes. Main reason being is that I feel that they're the only Democratic party on the whole list. They're the only ones who have upheld the referendum, and everyone else is ignoring the EU, and they're ignoring Agenda 21 from the EU, and I find that so crazy, so unimaginable. You know, that people haven't looked into these things. They don't know what Agenda 21 is. They don't even know what it is. Yet, that's all right, we'll vote for that. You haven't got a clue, people. You haven't got a clue. I bet half these people out there, you ask them, what's Agenda 21 from the European Union? What is it? They'll go, I don't know.
What do you say is coming? What do you say is coming?
Consolidation of the world, basically, under one global power. This is.
Well, okay. That's not true.
Before we do that, let me turn to some of the emails, because we're having problems with the calls, with the phones, I should say. Jack's opinion, Greta appears too self-righteous to me. She doesn't know how not to be, I don't understand what that means, because of her age. The message is great, but the delivery is poor. This comes from Dom. How come this girl's parents haven't been nicked for her not attending school? I think they're probably on a greater plane now. And lastly, this comes from Len. I'd like to know who writes all of her speeches. I don't believe it can be her, as while she reads them very well, I've seen occasions when she's unable to answer any questions. Well, I think the young lady has a condition, doesn't she? I think has Asperger's syndrome, whatever it is, so we need to be aware of that. Now, let's try again with Bill in Faversham. Bill, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, Bill, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hello, yes,
Yeah.
sure. Hi, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I think it devalues the prestige of the Time Award. And the reason is, Nick, if you were going into a really important LBC meeting, or if you were going in to have an operation, a serious operation at a hospital,
right,
a 16-year-old with a script walked in, how would you feel about that?
Well, there's no way they could have... I think, to be a surgeon, you're looking at 5 or 7 years training. It's never going to happen. So
well, exactly.
It's not
so why are we listening to a 16-year-old with a script?
But it's not a fair analogy.
Global warming is supposed to, and climate change or whatever they call it now, is supposed to be more important than an individual problem.
Right.
And she's coming in and lecturing people. It's ridiculous. Basically, she's a sock puppet for whoever is behind all of this.
Well... Okay, I mean, those are rather strong words. You don't think that there are any climate issues on the planet at all?
No, there are lots of issues. Plastic and pollution are very, very important. But there are lots of other things. They say all the science is in agreement, and whenever you hear that, you should run for the hills.
Okay.
So whenever they said another science is, it's been wrong.
I hear you, but do you not think that the very fact that she is so young is what gives her... If she were a professor in his or her mid-40s, it wouldn't have the same impact as a girl who started school strikes, would it, in all honesty?
That's absolutely true, and that's why she's been introduced, because they thought if they put a young girl up who looks even younger than her years, she wouldn't be criticised, whereas a professor would.
I hear what you're saying, Bill. We do have to sort of afford her a certain degree of credit for what she has achieved. Bill, thank you for that. Sorry we had the hitch on the phones. I think it might have been me pressing the wrong button, so I'm sorry if I cut you off. Bill, thank you. We will move on. Let's talk about St. Greta Thunberg is now Time Magazine Person of the Year. John F. Kennedy, Mother Teresa, the Apollo astronauts. Luminary company, indeed. Matt in High Wycombe. Is it deserved? Good morning.
Yes, Nick, for me it is deserved. Of course, she's a very high-profile face.
She's 16.
An important movement. Yeah, that's fair enough. But if you look at the people who've been given Time Magazine's Person of the Year, they include Stalin and Hitler, but that's not really what I want to talk about. I do appreciate your discussion, Nick, but you've kind of missed the point, which I think Greta Thunberg would make herself, that the science is more important than the person. But as usual, because people can't combat or deal with the science, they engage with the person, being Greta Thunberg. So what I would say is you have a duty to inform. There's no problem with having people from Spiked on, but they have taken something like $300,000 admitted by Brendan Neal, who leads Spiked online.
Hang on. They're not here to defend themselves. What is just be more broad in your allegation? What are your worries about having a discussion concerning Greta Thunberg, then? Are you not allowed to be a dissenting voice?
They're definitely allowed to be dissenting voices, but if those voices are paid by fossil fuel interests, then maybe, just maybe, Nick, you have a duty first to research and second to disclose. And thirdly, what I would say is, in terms of the science, you were bad at science in high school, fine, that's fair enough. You have a very, very high profile here to educate and inform. Surely it's up to you to get yourself across the science, which is both complicated but also not that hard to understand.
It is for me.
It's kind of your job to be informed, mate. And here you are, not being informed. On radio, being paid to be uninformed.
No. It is for me. And my job is to also reflect both sides. There are people, of course, who say that the world is not as precariously poised as some would have it. Now, I don't know.
None of those people have relevant degrees.
What? So you're only allowed an opinion? Mate,
no,
I don't have a degree, and I'm never going to have a degree in this sphere.
Let's put it this way, Nick. Let's say a doctor tells you have cancer, right? I'll go and get a second opinion. What we have here with climate change is one doctor says it's definitely climate change. The next doctor says it's definitely climate change. 97 out of 100 doctors say it's definitely climate change. They come from countries all over the world, some of which with massive oil reserves. Russia, China, places that use fossil fuels like crazy. But people like you want to call it even. Why?
Because I have to reflect the other side of the coin.
But that's not the other side of the coin. That's 3% of the coin, Nick.
Well, no. Hold on, mate. Hold on. The level. I have accepted, obviously, that the planet is, as I think I've used the word already, a precarious position. But we can't. We can't just necessarily swallow the science wholesale and just say that's it. End of. You have
to. No one's asking you to.
Well,
this is a multilateral.
I sense you are. You said that every scientist we go to says it's a problem, so it must be a problem.
That's not what I said, Nick. What I said is 97 out of 100 scientists say that it is a problem.
Well, then we have to reflect the views of the three, don't we?
Oh, really? And are you going to give them 3% of the airtime, Nick, or 50% of the airtime? Because if you are, then what you're doing is favouring a massive, tiny minority argument and giving it equal weighting with an argument that actually is based in science.
Okay. I think if you were to reflect the views of people in a restaurant, in a coffee shop today, they would not necessarily all be as strident as you are, and they would appreciate hearing what the other views. You're citing research, 97 out of 100. I'm sure I could find research where I was so motivated and had the time that would make another picture, paint a different picture, and that's what we have to reflect. Matt, I've enjoyed our conversation. Thank you. 8:39. I'm neither an expert in gang crime. I've not done study that, and I don't happen to have been a drug-pushing gangster, but hopefully I can have a conversation about that. Mind you, reflect the other view, much to Matt's anger, but Anne Cooper says, come back and talk to me about Greta Thunberg after she's worked for 10 years and paid her taxes. Scott in Bexley Heath. Scott, do you think she should have got this award? Good morning.
Absolutely not. Good morning, Nick. Absolutely not.
Why not, sir?
Well, personally, I believe that it should have collectively been given to the Hong Kong protesters.
Yeah,
simply because they're doing a much more, on-the-ground substantial issue where they're actually fighting for something.
Well, she would argue she's fighting, of course.
She could argue till the cows come home. Ultimately, her cause is completely nonsensical. It takes absolute arrogance of anyone to sit there and genuinely believe that after the Earth, which is 1 billion years old, survived multiple, countless extinction-level events, undergone unlimited amounts of catastrophes, civilization ending historical events as well, multiple world wars.
Well,
all of a sudden, people are going to put on a 1 billion-year-old Earth that is going to end in 12 years.
Well, I remind you of what one of my earlier callers, Matt, said, that there are over 100 scientists. I don't know quite the scale, but 97 of them support what Greta Thunberg is saying.
But with all due respect, Nostradamus was also a form of scientist, and there was plenty of scientists as well, going back to the Greeks, where they claimed doomsday events were going to happen.
You don't buy it at all, out of interest, Scott?
It's not that I don't buy it. The thing is, I feel that the issue is being conflated. Climate change and environmental change are two different things. Climate change is caused by the Earth's solar axial position in orbit of the Sun. Whoa. Environmental change, with plastics in the ecosystem, paper and waste and stuff and pollution, those things are actually caused by humans. Those things that can be directly changed.
And many would argue that's what Greta's trying to make awareness of. Scott, thank you.
Emma has called from Bromley. Hello, Emma.
Oh, hi, Sheila. Thank you for having me on. My person of the year, bit contentious. I really like Donald Trump. I used to watch the programme years ago, the...
Apprentice?
Yes, the American Apprentice. And I was just really impressed with how his mind worked and his decision-making skills. So I've liked him a long time. I read one of his books a long time ago. Don't ask me what it said, but I quite enjoyed it. And
well, that's very Trumpian. I can't remember a single thing about it, but it was great, believe me. Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying it was great, but I've followed the guy a long time, and I watch his rallies on Google, and oh my goodness, he's so funny. He's a real showman. He loves to work the crowd. They're all in stitches. They're all having great fun. He's a natural comedian. When he does who were the two lovers that were sort of colluding to get him impeached or what have you? And he's, oh, Lisa, I love you, and oh, I love you. And he's just, I think he's great. And
do you think he's funny? Do you think he's funny when he makes racist remarks? Do you think he's funny when he criticises the grieving mother of an American veteran? Do you think it's funny when he attacks democracy in America? Do you think those things are funny?
I've never witnessed any of that.
Have you not? Have you not got a telly?
I have, but the press was saying he made racist remarks about Mexicans. I mean, if you watched the full clip, he actually criticised there's certain gang members that come over and do hideous things. Something 13, M13 or something, some particular gang that come over from Mexico. He didn't say it. He's got. I've got friends that are. Latino over in America, and they love him. They think he's absolutely brilliant. So he was only criticising these very foul gang members.
So you like him? His character appeals to you, his humour appeals to you. But what about him? Do you think would place him on the front? I mean, he's been on the front of Time magazine, I think. What about him would give him that honour?
Well, the fact that he's created thousands and thousands of jobs through bringing back industry, the way America is just doing so well economically, it's just incredible how he, employment figures for the black community are the lowest they've ever been, or at least they've been in 50 years or something. I mean, it's just... Obama said, oh, you need a magic wand to bring back industry and this and that. Obama didn't have a clue. He was a community organizer or whatever he was. He didn't understand business and industry. And Trump does. And America has benefited just massively from that, and the way he sticks up for them. With doing, you know, how he wants to do his trade deals and what have you, and how he puts his country first. I just think it's really excellent, and how what he's been put through with all the witch hunts and the trying to impeach him, and how, you know, I just really, really admire his strength and his acumen.
Okay,
And,
I have to say, I mean, it's almost as though someone set you up as a joke to me. But I know that I can hear you're sincere, but I couldn't disagree with you more on everything.
That's okay, isn't it?
Of course it's okay. Of course it's okay. But I couldn't disagree with you more. And if that impeachment stuff is getting on your nerves, we're going to talk about it in 15 minutes. Sorry about that, Emma. Thank you, Emma in Bromley. Donald Trump is her person of the year. Before I get back to more of your calls, let's look to the States for a few minutes. My first caller who loved Donald Trump might be made uncomfortable by this, but anyway, let's do it. David K. Johnston joins me. Good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon.
And for people who might not be familiar with you, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, investigative reporter, and author of The Making of Donald Trump. And another, it's even worse than you think, what the Trump administration is doing to America. And I'm doing an hour with my callers as we speak about who their person of the year is. We know that Greta Thunberg is the Time person of the year. My first caller said Donald Trump and was saying, praising him to the rafters and saying that he has been smart on job creation. He's been smart on the economy. He's leagues ahead of Barack Obama. What do you say to that?
Well, job growth was faster under Barack Obama after the economy that he inherited turned around. Remember, Obama took office, there were 750,000 jobs a month being lost. Once that turned around, Obama had job growth that was about 3% faster than we're seeing now. Trump said if he got in, we would see 4, 5, 6% GDP growth. His GDP growth numbers, that's the gross domestic product or the size of the economy, have been average for the last 70 years, so nothing spectacular there. He inherited a very good situation, and he has managed so far not to completely screw it up. On the other hand, farm bankruptcies are on the rise. The American Midwest is suffering seriously because of this, and he's replaced market activity, selling corn and soybeans to China, with instead welfare, about $28 billion of it so far. I think he's enjoyed the benefits of what was a strong and growing economy, but there's no indication he's done anything to improve it, with one exception. By allowing polluters to pollute, he is allowing them to increase their profits. On the other hand, I won't live to have this happen to me, but my grandchildren and their children, more of them will have cancer and heart disease and asthma, because the air in America is literally getting dirty and the water in America is getting less clean, undoing policies that had been improving these things for almost 50 years.
And you mentioned Ivanka earlier on in the conversation about Donald Trump wanting to be an emperor and she'd be the empress that followed him. There is something, well, to my mind, there's something strange about the way she has been placed in the center of that administration in a sense. How do you read it?
Well, you could, of course, see this as simple nepotism, but the one person in the world Donald is close to is his daughter, Ivanka, who you may recall he said, if she wasn't my daughter, I'd be dating her.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump runs a third-generation white-collar crime family. He has spent his entire life cheating workers, investors, the people who thought they were going to be students at Trump University. He's a con artist, and he runs a very small operation in business in which the people around him were either family or people who were highly dependent on him once they'd compromised themselves and gotten involved. And Donald doesn't want to have outside people. I mean, he's operating without a real chief of staff, for example. He's been unable to attract and retain people for government positions. And Ivanka and Jared, her husband, he trusts because they're part of the family. And inside the family, people trust one another. But they're not qualified in any way for the jobs that they're holding.
And when people say that the family, the wider family, including Ivanka and Jared and Melania, that they all have a kind of Stockholm syndrome and that's why they're still in there, what do you say to that? I mean, my instinct is, you know, they're grown adults, they're making choices. But what's your...
No, I think you're right about that. When Donald Trump divorced his first wife and repeatedly publicly humiliated her back in 1990 or so, his 3 older children would have nothing to do with him. In fact, Ivanka wrote a book about how she would have nothing to do with him. Then they grew up. They looked around at the world and realized no one would take care of them financially the way Daddy would. And he bought them back. And I've interviewed people who've told me stories about how being at a photo shoot, Donald was once handed his daughter Tiffany by his then-wife Marla Maples, who said, hold Tiffany for a moment, and Donald jumped back and was in revulsion about this.
When she was a baby?
When she was a baby, and when he also made a comment about, you know, how will she grow up? And he cupped his hands over himself and said, well, we don't know if she'll be like her mother. I mean, this is a man who's he makes Philistine an embarrassing word, but he's a Philistine. He has no culture. He has no knowledge of world events. He does not understand, for example, in the Middle East, the difference between a Sunni and a Shia and why it matters. And so it's important to understand, Donald is conned people. He has no knowledge of anything. One of the things, Donald claims to be the world's greatest expert on 22 subjects. One of them is a subject on which I'm a world-recognized authority, taxes. And he also says, under oath, he knows nothing of accounting. Well, not knowing accounting, you cannot know taxes.
You cannot. Thank you, David. Interesting to get your perspective. David K. Johnston.
That's the most important thing of all, winning the trust of people that have put their trust in us, many of them for the first time, and Boris will have my full support as he does that.
Well, I don't know why he's talking to a tree.
A nuanced, layered conversation about the BBC. For me, there probably is a powerful argument for suggesting that the non-news arms of it are redundant, or at least the model of funding them is redundant, given that organisations like Netflix and Amazon and big studios are making their own entertainment programmes. But the Reithian principle, you see, of inform, educate and entertain, that goes out the window when you throw it all into the commercial sector, because in the commercial sector, it's almost all about bums on seats, which means that if it turns out that educating people or informing people doesn't get bums on seats, like the last caller on the political phone-in about educating people without them realising, then you're only left with information, like a sort of intellectual diabetes, where all you're getting is sugar. But if you lose the news arm, which everybody at the moment thinks is biased, you lose something really valuable. I've got a frog in my throat. John's in Dulwich. You can entertain the troops while I have a good cough, John. Carry on.
Well, I think that the BBC, having worked there previously, is the most exclusive, champagne, socialist, biased club in the land.
Do you?
It's biased because...
Why did they let you in?
Well, they didn't let me in for very long, years, but
Same
not
here.
into their elite club. And what goes on at the BBC is basically doesn't reflect the real world that it reports into.
So which bits of the BBC are we talking about? Are you suggesting that EastEnders is implausible, or are you suggesting that there's a political bias in the news coverage?
Well, no, I'm saying that the actual organisation itself...
Yeah, but you just sound like a disillusioned ex-employee. I mean...
No, not disillusioned one bit.
Right.
When I came out of the BBC, I did extremely well for myself. I've got no axe to grind, and I was revered there.
You've got no axe to grind, and you were revered by all the Champagne socialists.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what's your grievance then?
No, it's no grievance. That's what I'm trying to make out to you. It's just an observation.
So it's a good thing that it's a massive club of elitist Champagne socialists?
Well, only to the extent that it takes money, no matter what it puts out, and in the actual reporting of certain areas of life...
For example?
Well, politics is one of them.
Right.
And it is biased.
So how?
There's no doubt about it. Laura Kuenssberg,
Yes.
the glee on her face when she was asking Theresa May, are you going to resign?
Do you think she's left-wing?
Shouting it across Downing Street at her.
You think she's
and
left?
there was glee. It was akin, it was actually akin to Nicola Sturgeon having her moment.
I just need to clarify, are you accusing Laura Kuenssberg of being a Labour Party sympathiser, a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn?
Didn't say that.
No, I know.
Didn't say that.
But I know, that's why I'm having to ask you the question. What are you... Because you accused her of being biased.
She was not impartial when she showed so much glee.
So who does she favour?
In her face and voice when asking if Theresa May was going to resign.
Who does she favour? No, so she's anti-Conservative or just anti-Theresa May?
Well, she might have done that to a Labour Prime Minister.
Well, then she'd be impartial, wouldn't she?
No.
So if she treated them both, exactly the same.
When asking the question.
If she treated them both exactly the same, that would be evidence that she's not impartial.
That would mean that she was working even-handed.
Right. So she is impartial then.
Not impartial.
So what's the difference?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. If you're
if I say what's the difference, you can't say absolutely as an answer.
No. If she treated all of the people she interviewed in the same manner and showing the same expressions,
yes,
and with the same diligence,
yes,
then I would say that she's working impartially,
right,
because she's doing it to everybody the same.
But you don't think she does do that?
She doesn't.
So who does she favour for the 7th time?
I haven't got a clue.
Right. Well, that was a very illuminating call, John. I can tell you what, John, I can see why they revered you at the BBC. You're a genius.
Jeff is next in Basildon. Hi, Jeff. How was your voting experience on Thursday?
Yeah, I literally went into the polling booth. I've been a lifelong Labour supporter, and I literally held my nose and my cross against the Conservative Party. Wasn't an easy thing to do, but Jeremy Corbyn, in my mind, is no better than a communist. His ideas, associations with some extremists like the IRA or Hamas. What was the final nail in the coffin for me is when I learned from LBC, from Majid Nawaz, went through a list of details about what he'd done and where he'd been associated with, including receiving £20,000 from the government of Iran for basically supporting them.
So, given that he's going to be off, Jeff, I mean, he's not going immediately, but he won't be around for the next election, does Labour then automatically get your vote, or are you a bit more fluid these days?
I'm a bit more fluid. I mean, I've been left-wing all my life, I guess, but I think, in some ways, I've taken a red pill, and I think I've woken up to a lot of things which I didn't realise weren't quite correct. And
wow.
I think, if anything, I've actually turned right-wing, strangely enough. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Boris. I think he's a liar and a cheat, but perhaps that's what we need. I don't know.
Wow. Are you hearing yourself, Jeff?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am. It sounds completely stupid, I know, but he's a good leader, I'll give him that. And he's very affable, I guess, and he comes across well. I did vote for Maggie Thatcher back in the day as a one-off when I was very young. But ever since then, I voted for Labour. But I believe in Brexit. If he delivers a Canada-style trade agreement and delivers his promises on the NHS and everything else, then I will vote for him again.
Maybe, Jeff, voting as Conservative is just something you do every 30 years.
Well, maybe, you're right. Yeah.
We'll see what happens next time.
Burnley, just one of the many northern towns to turn from red to blue, and all facing the same issues: poverty, low wages, and the struggle to find a place to call home. Take Jordan and Anthony, desperate for someone to fix their lives, both in work on 0-hour contracts, living in a bedsit.
Is that your number one priority, housing mixed with jobs?
Employment, housing, yeah. Permanent employment.
Permanent employment, yeah. Not 0-hour contracts, stuff like that.
Have you got hope that Boris Johnson's
Conservatives can lift you guys out of this poverty.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've got hope.
Absolutely.
32, Just beyond the basin in the nearby town of Clermont, the price of beef cattle is running at a premium. 44. These cattle men and women have coexisted with coal mines for generations, they tell us.
You're a man of science, you're a vet. What do you think about climate change, the question of carbon emissions that will result from this coal being burnt?
Nothing at all. One volcanic eruption anywhere will blow out 10 years of that. I'm not a climate change person. It's been happening since the world was formed.
I think that's an interesting point, and I think back to, it must have been about 2008, 2009, when in Barkingham-Dagenham, the BNP got various councillors elected. And I can remember going to, and a friend of mine was standing in the 2010 election in Dagenham against John Cruddas. And so I spent a bit of time there and doing quite a bit of door knocking. And I also interviewed Nick Griffin in Dagenham. And in a sense, Margaret Hodge raised the alarm at that point that Labour was abandoning its white working class areas and they were feeling betrayed. And this was 10 years ago. And they don't seem to have learnt the lessons from that.
No lessons. And the Brexit vote showed that, because I know you're saying about working class, and I get you, but we are working people. I work as a painter decorator, and I work for a living, so we're working people. I know your dad's a farmer, and I know farmers, and they work hard. People who work for a living, we care about our jobs, and we care about our communities, and when you're just seeing your community flooded, and you know, it doesn't matter how many times Labour deny it. You try getting a council flat or a housing association flat. There's endless Polish people and Lithuanians or whatever in there. You can't get in there. I know someone who asked and they were told they'd be on a waiting list for 12 years.
And you see, when you say something like that, there will be people listening to you thinking, he is a racist.
No, I'm not a racist. A racist is someone who hates other people. Now, I spend a lot of time because I work in London, and London doesn't look like London that my mum and dad married in. London looks like a multicultural... It's like being in some other country. It isn't like...
No, so you don't...
That doesn't mean you're racist.
No, well, it kind of does, actually. I mean, when you say, London's become multicultural, that indicates to me that you don't want it to be multicultural, so that indicates to me that you do have these sentiments.
I believe in balance. I believe people can come here and work hard and have a life, and I support that 100%.
And do you not think that the Polish and Lithuanian people you were talking about generally do that?
I think some of them work really hard and are very decent people, and they have my 100% support.
Just like some British people work very hard and are very decent people, and just as there are lots that don't.
Yep. Can I just say this? There's a benefit class as well. You're right. And it's not just working class now. There's a benefit class. You could say there's an immigrant class.
They are not immigrants. Immigrants come to this country because they want to work, and generally
not all. Okay, Ian, let me
there will be a very, very small minority that come because they think they can fleece the benefit system.
Yeah, but you're just repeating the Liberal agenda.
No, I'm really not. I'm talking facts.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Straight question.
Go on, then.
Do you know how many billions of pounds are paid out in universal credit and benefits to non-British born citizens? Do you know the answer to that question?
No, I don't.
You don't, do you? Well, go and Google it, mate. Do you know how many... Do you know? Yeah, I do. And it's in the billions. The last figure I read was something like 5.4 billion. So that's not right what you said, is it? Go and have a look. How many housing... It's true. Go and have a look. How many housing association flats and houses are taken by non-British born citizens?
But you're not racist.
And that's where the problem is. No, it's not about racist. This is our country. Who built this country? Your dad, our dad, our granddad. Yeah. No. So does that not mean if your sister needed some social housing, should she be at the back of the queue, or should she have a front of the queue place? Do you think there's any justification in that?
Well, I don't know how the queuing system works in terms of how it's all allocated, and I completely understand.
A person from the EU, and you're just proving why Labour lost 17.4 million of us, because a person from the EU can step to the front of the housing queue and take a house. Yes, they can.
Complete rubbish.
It's done on points. The point system does not recognise any nationality.
Oh, so you think that somebody from Lithuania, just because they happen to be Lithuanian, they get an advantage in the housing system?
if they've got a kid or they've got whatever points, there's no advantage to British people, is the point, Ian. None at all. So British people get no favouritism on jobs, on anything. So of course the NHS is overloaded, housing is overloaded, 8 million extra people and their families, right, means there's less housing, less jobs, our unions are worth nothing because they've been destroyed by the EU, and the working class aren't all stupid. We see the problem that the EU has damaged this country, right? And Labour is out of tune with us. So we've gone to the Tories because they're saying they're going to build houses, they're going to look after the NHS, and they're going to deliver Brexit. And it's nothing to do with being racist. That's what the Labour Party always does. They call everyone racist.
Because, mate, you are giving me evidence with virtually every word that you say that you may not think you're racist, you may not think you have a racist bone in your body, but virtually the whole conversation will have convinced most of our listeners that you kind of do. You aren't an overt racist. You're not going to discriminate and shout at someone to their face and all the rest of it. But all the attitudes that you've just displayed would indicate that you've got something against people who aren't quite like you. And that is racism. And I don't really want to hear any more of it. Jerry, thank you.
Tony says we should abolish the House of Lords, move to an elected second chamber who've got powers to hold the government to account and stop absolute power. James in Southampton says, I don't agree with abolishing or reforming the Lords. The purpose of the Lords is to scrutinise based on experience without the need to represent constituents or worry about winning the next election. They truly have the country's best interests at the forefront. Ricky is next in Glasgow. Ricky, what would you do with the Lords?
Hi. Well, I would return it to an unelected body, hereditary. One of the advantages now, women rank as their first in line. They now also rank to take their place in the House of Lords on a hereditary system. So that would bring more women into the House of Lords.
And where's the joy, where's the advantage for us all in the House of Lords being populated by people who are only there because of who their parents were?
Exactly. Well, everybody stands a chance of having their parents being in the House of Lords. It's open to everybody. Now, that's all very well going in a huff and saying that.
I don't quite follow, Ricky. So how would you get people into the House of Lords? How would you choose them?
Well, it would be hereditary. It's first in line for the estate. Women now qualify to be first in line.
Yes, I got that point, but I'm wondering
right, okay.
who would they be? How would you populate the House? If you're going to start from scratch, would you, or would you keep the hereditaries who are there?
The hereditaries who are there would stay.
Right.
The advantage of this system is that they need not be frightened of the radio, television, newspapers. Yes. They can be open and honest to the public and not lose their seat by just telling the truth. And if it is hereditary, say if a young lady takes her place there, we're talking about experts. If she can draw on the knowledge of experts, be it from the police or anybody else, but you now have a representative from the whole of the population, not just picked by the buddies who are all in the political game. So I see an advantage in the hereditary system. I know your point you're making, where do we start?
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, it's a random accident, isn't it? It's a random accident who you get. I mean, it's a bit like me saying, it's a bit like me saying that the current person who's talking to me on LBC should be in the House of Lords.
Good idea. That'll do. No, you get my point. That's what I'm putting forward. It won't be agreed with by many people, but I think it's best that we see more women in the House of Lords on the hereditary system. I don't think women are stupid, any more stupid than men and vice versa. And if they wish to draw on what women have experienced and need to know about and pass on knowledge on about, they're in the House of Lords now, and so be it. It's okay trying to look for something perfect, but the hereditary system leaves those who earn their place, or shall we say, pick up the place in the House of Lords.
But what, Ricky, if the hereditary system, if it means that ultimately you've got a whole load of unqualified, stupid people in the upper house?
Is that not what we have at the moment? Oh, I shouldn't have said that, should I?
And on that bombshell.
So, Daniel, it has a strange feel to it, doesn't it, this?
Yeah, but I just rang in to say personally that lady, Lisa, who rang in, is the entire reason why the Labour Party lost. Because honestly, the way she just spoke about people like myself, I'm highly insulted. I hope she's listening. You really insulted me. I don't understand how you could make these assumptions about me. Basically called me either an idiot or a racist, one of the two. And I'm neither. I'm an immigrant myself. My family are immigrant background. We came to this country. We're proud of this country. We work extremely hard. I come from a council estate. My mum was a single parent. I've got 13 brothers and sisters from both sides, all of us mixed heritage. And you know what? We all work hard, want to get things done. I don't have any problem with immigration or anything. I just personally believe in Brexit for reasons of my own, that I believe we shouldn't be ruled by any other country. Pardon me. For 1,000 years, nobody's conquered this country, and I don't believe that we should give
nobody
up our
conquered
independence.
it. Nobody conquered it.
No, but I'm saying,
but when
I
you
don't
went, no, but
believe that we
just
should
for a
be
minute.
superior. Anybody should be superior to us. That's my reasoning. But nonetheless,
nobody
I'm
is.
not racist, and she's basically just come on the radio and said to me that unless you believe in this, you're a racist. You want less immigration, less smaller classes, all of this due to immigration. That was her one thing, and that's extremely rude. Extremely rude.
Well, I did point out to her that she was.
You did
assuming people were.
I'm a massive fan of yours, Sheila. Although we're different politically slant, I'm a massive fan
On some
of yours.
things,
Listen
but not
every
everything,
day.
I'm sure. And Daniel, on Brexit, though, you know, I disagree with your characterisation of what being in the EU was, but that's okay. You know, you've won the day. Congratulations, Brexit's going to happen. But isn't the reality that our relationship and membership, more importantly, of the EU, do you accept that it brought, not to everybody, but that it brought big economic advances in this country?
Sheila on the radio, 1 second. I do believe that it did bring economics to it, and I didn't vote on an economical basis. Not everything in life is purely about economics.
You just thought the Parliament and nothing else should be where decisions are made about this country.
Exactly. And when people say they don't trust our government, you have the capacity to change your government. When you can change your government, you can create change. But when we can't change the people who have more power, the EU can set rules that the Queen has to abide by. The Queen is meant to be the leader of our country. I don't believe in a Queen personally, but the concept that we have a Queen that has to abide by rules that somebody else in another country sets, I don't agree with that. I think that's terrible. I think that we as a country should rule ourselves and determine. And we as the people, we thank God we live in a democracy where we can change our leaders. And
okay, well, let me put to you slightly differently some of the points I put to Lisa. If I was saying to Lisa, if in 2-3 years' time those places that voted for Boris Johnson, unusually voted for Boris Johnson and voted Conservative...
Just like me, I would never have voted for Boris Johnson, usually.
Well, if in 3 years' time there is no evidence of a benefit to Brexit, no evidence that he's keeping his promises on schooling, on health, on social care, on economic prosperity in those regions, what then? He's still there, Daniel? Oh, I think he's had enough.
If James is in Norfolk, James, are you ready to move on?
Hi, yes, I'm very. Last week I was so happy because of it was the only time in my life that my votes actually counted in the referendum, and 3.5 years of the MPs willfully trying to bulldoze out the vote has made me very ill from stress and worry. And there's lots of people like me, but no one mentions that. You know, we voted in good faith and we wanted our vote to be implemented, and now we have finally got it through. That, you know, next year I believe that like a big weight's been lifted and we can move on as a country, as a United Kingdom.
And can you reach out to Remain and say, I feel your pain, let's come together?
Not really, because of what I feel is they've had their way for too long, you know, and we voted in a fair vote. Look, I hate the word EU citizenship. There's no such thing. We never voted to be an EU citizen. You know, we're the United Kingdom, and we never had given consent to the project to what it's become. So,
but James, let me suggest to you. Let me suggest to you, James, that you've won. I know you would rather have prevailed much sooner. But let me suggest to you that you've won. You're on the winning side. You're entitled to feel excited and proud and happy. And I'm suggesting to you that there are lots of people who are, for want of a better expression, on the losing side, who don't feel any animosity towards you, but they do have some genuine fear about the future. And I just wonder whether, you know, you could find it in you to be nice.
Well, I mean, like, I always respect votes. Like, I didn't ever vote for Tony Blair, but I had to just have his government for 13 years, and I always respect the Democratic vote if it goes against me. But for the first time it went my way, and it's like we've seen like people like Hillary Benn laughing at us basically on the telly trying to overturn our vote, and like he was showing no compassion to us. And you know, lots of people I know, because we've got an older population in North Norfolk, they've been very ill with worry from it, you know, and it's not been right on their health, mental health especially. So I'm actually really happy we've got it done, and it's ridiculous to suggest that people are going to be sent home. It's just ridiculous.
Well, we'll see. James, thank you very much.
Julian.
I'm here.
Hi, Charles. So you hear Julian is in Germany, and he called it a ticking time bomb. This speeded up agenda. What do you say?
You want me to refer to his case? Well, let me tell you. You see, the point is we do not actually bargain properly. We have given these Europeans in this country, you know, what they want to stay here. And yet, you see, we didn't make it conditional on what would happen to our people in Europe. This is the nonsense of the bargaining that we do. You've got to have no deal on the table and be firm. Anyway, the shocking news that I've just heard over the BBC now about the Cobham thing is this is Boris Johnson's first sellout of genuine leavers. Let's make no mistake. This is Boris Johnson's first sellout of genuine leavers, and therefore, you see, the point is he just wants to be Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, and he has taken back into the party so many people that were opposed to him as Remainers, and he's got to keep his party together.
Okay, let's just press pause, because there's a lot. You're saying a lot, and you're saying it quickly. And I want to unravel a little of what you've said. So you're talking about Cobham, the sale of a very old and distinguished aircraft manufacturer, a British aircraft manufacturer, to an American interest, and you're saying that is a sellout, and the first sellout of Boris Johnson. So I'm trying to understand whether
there could be more sellouts. That's what I'm saying, because we want our own country. We want to run our own businesses. There's no difference really selling out to the Americans and selling out so many British to the Europeans. We did not campaign to be the 51st state of America.
Okay.
We leavers want independence.
What does that?
But what does that? Country.
Okay. Well, what does that mean? Who are you going to do business with? I mean, how is that going to work? I mean, if you're sort of suggesting that this is a sellout to have any kind of deal with the Americans, there are trade deals which are going to be done now with other countries. That is the nature of the economy that we are in. I'm trying to understand what your ideal scenario is, Charles Brand. What is it?
The ideal is that we promote our own businesses in our own country under our own control, not have a closing down sale of all British assets to any foreign power that comes, or company that comes along and has enough money to buy us out. For goodness sake, this has been happening all the time while we've been in Europe. So many businesses, look at our railways sold out to European.
Well, I hear the anger in your voice, Charles. Thank you.